well, me. I will be moving on to our next speaker, who is also pre-recorded. I will be sharing the video with you all, and we would like to welcome Sukalyan Deb, who is an academic scholar and a researcher who is currently working at IISc. So he is going to present his research and his opinions on cognitive neuroscience. Let me just share. So he wanted to make it more in a accessible format for all of you to watch, especially as, apologies for the delay, but it's been a long conference. And so he made it in a reel format. And after this, he will be shortly uploading it to his socials. So please do follow him.
What happens in your brain when you're stressed, emotional, or under pressure, but still have to make the right decision? Imagine you are giving an exam, in an interview, or in an argument. You know what you should do, but your emotions are pulling you towards a different direction. Your attention shifts, your heart races, and suddenly a simple decision feels difficult. So, this is what cognitive neuroscience tries to understand. Cognitive neuroscience is the science that tells us how the brain dictates our behavior. So, it basically tells you how the brain pays attention, remembers something, how does it process emotions, helps you make the right decision, and learn from reward. So, the brain is not just a biological organ. It is constantly predicting, evaluating, and choosing, is something safe, rewarding, should I focus here, should I avoid this, should I act now? So how do we go about doing all of this? Basically, we design game-like experiments and then call participants to the lab and make them play these games. So we record their reaction time and accuracy in different conditions when they are performing these experiments. Or we can also look at their eyes through eye tracking and see where the gaze patterns were. Now we can pair all of that with techniques in order to look inside the brain. Like you can have EEG recordings in order to see which brain regions are getting activated and how are the signals changing when people are performing this sort of a task. Or we can put people inside a fMRI scanner, which deep brain regions are getting activated. And we can also do computational modeling in order to have a better mechanistic understanding of what is happening. So in my PhD at Center for Neuroscience, Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, I try to understand how motivation and emotions interact with each other. So let's start with this. In my example, in order to understand emotions, we show participants emotional images like facial stimuli with different expressions in order to see which brain regions are getting activated when you process that emotion. In order to manipulate motivation, you can have a condition where you give participants monetary incentives in order to reinforce their behavior, and you can have a control condition in which you do not reward them. Now someone would ask, why is it so important to study all of this? For one, emotions are really important because as humans, emotions are a byproduct of evolution for us. It is those stimuli that have helped us survive. So if our ancestors did not feel fearful when they look at a predator like a tiger in the jungle, they wouldn't have ran off from there, right? So emotional stimuli have a really special significance in the way the brain processes it. But in the modern world, all of that has jumbled up. So when I'm giving a lecture, I can look at the audience in front of me and my brain won't be able to distinguish the audience from the predators like the tiger in the jungle. And motivation is the single most driver that can reinforce any sort of task or behavior that you do. If you're not motivated for something, you wouldn't do that. If you're not motivated to listen to me talking, you wouldn't listen to me, right? All of this have great significance when it comes to clinical disorders, as deficits in the processing of these interactions can lead to disorders like anxiety, depression, or addiction. So now the question is, who can enter the field of cognitive neuroscience? And I think the answer would be most people. So it's a very discipline agnostic subject. It's highly, so we have folks from all disciplines, like you have people from maths, engineering, medicine, biology, psychology, philosophy. So what really matters here is your interest in the subject. If you're really keen and are curious about how the human mind works, cognitive neuroscience is for you. And the other question that I get a lot is, what skills should you develop to come into the field? Well, for starters, learning some basic psychology, a bit of neuroscience, learning statistics, a bit of coding, Python or MATLAB can be really helpful. Read research papers slowly, try to join a lab, do some internship, work on some small projects, and learn how experiments are actually done. So the work for a cognitive neuroscience researcher mainly involves collecting data, designing experiments, interacting with participants, and once you get the data, you sort of play around with it, build models to understand what the data is telling you, and wondering why the results don't look like the way you expected them to be. Well, the most beautiful thing about cognitive neuroscience is it connects the brain to our everyday life. So when you study it, you are not basically studying cognitive neuroscience just as a subject, but you're trying to understand why are we behaving in the way we are. In terms of future prospects, you can either plan to stay in academia and research your way through of which brain regions are responsible for what. Also, you can transition into industry and try to learn about neurotech or brain-computer interface. Also, wherever human decision making is involved, cognitive neuroscience come handy, like financial decision making. And it has great implication in the clinical scenario where you try and understand different clinical disorders and a way to deal with them. So if you're interested to know more about this, I'll just link my website where you can get in touch with me and ask away your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Sukalyan Deb for that recording that. You can follow his socials, which we will be again sending out to you all with even Dr. Kapkin's details. He is a respected PhD scholar at the elite Indian Institute of Science at Bangalore, so it's really great that he could record that for us as his work uses advanced fMRI and behavioral models to decode emotional processing. Thank you so much to him. Now we will be moving on